Hello and welcome to MagicGatheringStrat. I'm Peyton. I've got a top 10 list for you guys here today, the top 10 underestimated and unused cards in the EDH format. You probably are not playing a very vast majority of these cards, but they are pretty damn good, and you should. So, this is my list. There are so many underplayed cards out there, and they're just insane. But I may have missed some, and this is therefore not a definitive list. So I also want to hear your suggestions. Anything you guys can think of, if it works and it's underplayed, post a comment. That would be so cool. I would love to see what can be done with this theme of unplayed cards. So the honorable mentions list obviously is first. Blinkmoth Urn. This is kind of a semi-obscure artifact from Mirrodin. At the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, they get some mana based on the number of artifacts they have. This card is only applicable in the commander decks that run the legendary artifact creatures. But if you are playing a Karn deck, or a Bosch Iron Golem deck, or a Memnarch deck, you need to play this card. It's as simple as that. You are going to get so much mana off of the urn. It's ridiculous. Memnarch and Bosch, you only need blue mana now to do the things. Sorry, blue mana for Memnarch and red mana for Bosch. That's the only color of mana you need to get work done, depending on the number of artifacts you have, since you're just going to get so much mana from the urn. It's pretty great, but only in those few decks, which is why it does not make it to the main list. Silklash Spider is decent against any deck running a lot of flyers, but other than that, it's just a 2/7 for 5 with reach, and it hurts your own flyers too if you have any, so it's very good against flying decks, but other than that, probably you shouldn't play it. Dread of Night would be awesome if every single deck was a White Weenie deck. But not every deck is a White Weenie deck, and this is only really a sideboard card for mono-black decks, playing against decks like White Weenie or Kemba, Ka Regent, where you want to make those cats 1/1, anything like that. Dread of Night is really good, and it should be played. It also happens to kill Risk the Redeemed, as long as they don't have the Lord effect in play, so Dread of Night is good for that too. Last on the honorable mentions, we have one of my personal favorites. We have Hide and Seek. This is one of the double cards from Dissension, and I'm sad that it only makes it to the honorable mentions list. It is a very good card in the format right now. Hide doesn't seem like much at first. You know, sure, it gets rid of an artifact or an enchantment, but its main application is the ability to remove the new enchantment creatures, the gods, from Theros, Born of the Gods, and coming up Journey into Nyx, have become very, very popular as commanders in the format, and Hide gets rid of them in a very great fashion. They are enchantments, and they do go bye-bye to Hide, since A, they're indestructible, and B, if you kill them anyway, or exile them, they just go back to the command zone. But Hide very effectively takes care of those, and Seek is a good way to take out some random threat and at the same time gain some life. Sadly, it's technically only 3 colors. Red, white, and black, mostly applicable to decks like Kali of the Vast, Teriel, Reckoner of Souls. Decks like that, Hide and Seek, very, very good. Other than that, it's just not playable based on its colors. So now that we've taken care of that business, number 10 is Juntu Stakes. This is a rare from Invasion, and it's got a rather strange effect. If it's got power 1 or less, it does not untap during your untap step. Screwing over mana elves and making Risk the Redeemed unusable? Sign me up. You may notice from this list that I am not a fan of Risk the Redeemed. I don't like him. He's annoying to play against, and he's not that fun to play with. You kind of get the same style of game every time, so Risk is not my favorite. But Juntu Stakes takes care of him, takes care of Noble Hierarchs, no problem. Great card. Number 9, we have Shard Convergence. Sort of a strange choice. It's a 4-cost sorcery, but it fixes mana really well. If you can get to 4 lands and play a Shard Convergence, you will have land drops for days. Only really effective in 3 and 5 color decks, but in 3 and 5 color decks, the ability to go get those duels, those shocks, is pretty game breaking. Well, not really. If making all of your land drops for until the end of time is game breaking, then this card is game breaking. But in some cases it is. It fixes colors, it's great in decks like Horde of Notions, and should be played more often. In our number 8 spot, we have the Shadowmoor and Eventide set dual enchantments. These cards do great things. You see them a lot in decks like Ural the Miststalker, and Zur the Enchanter usually plays the Steel of the Godhead. But those are generally 2 decks that you see fairly commonly, and they generally play these cards, but other than that, they aren't played nearly as much. And they're quite good. Putting one of these on your general gives it protection, and gives it a nice 2 power, 2 toughness boost. Really, really great effects you can get off of these cards. Things like Shroud, Haste, Indestructibility, Flying, Lifelink, Unblockability, Wither comes from Fists of the Demigod. All these effects for only, I think the most expensive one is 4 mana, and that's Runes of the Deus. But other than that, they're all 2 and 3. So, good cards, play them. They're also commons. You can pick them up very cheaply, very easily, and they're great cards. Number 7, we have called the Skybreaker. This card is a little bit more recognized because it was printed in the original Commander set, but think of it as a 5/5 flyer that's recursive, that can clone itself even when it's dead, as long as you have a land in hand. It's a pretty powerful card. Retrace is very, very relevant in a format where we're only allowed 1 copy of each card in a 99 card deck. And the ability to consistently make bombs out of dead land drops in hand later in the game, very effective. Call the Skybreaker. You should probably play it. And it's especially good in decks like Melek, Is It Paragon? Decks like Riku, because you can copy it easily. Good stuff. Number 6, we have Collective Blessing. This card was just printed in Return to Ravnica. Well, I won't say just printed. It was printed last year or 2 years ago, something like that. It's been a while, which is a little bit weird, but it's basically a really, really powerful Lord effect for every single one of your creatures. It's on this list because it turns aggro decks into decks that win a whole lot more consistently, because now you can attack with those mana elves. Now you can attack with those little utility creatures, because now they're actually threats. Read the flavor text. It does. Every little creature you have becomes a deadly foe. Super good. Such an advantage in creature combat. Collective Blessing. Number 5, we have the big counterspells. By this I mean Counterlash, Draining Welk, and Overwhelming Intellect. They're just big counterspells that come with some really cool effects on the side. Counterlash is my personal favorite among these. It does a really great job of turning their artifact that they don't really need but would be annoying into an Inkwell Leviathan. Yeah, that is helpful. You can counter any spell and retaliate with your own. And because you can cast it, if you counter an instant sorcery, you can do that as well. It's good stuff. Counterlash, it's a good card. Kind of end of story, fairly self-explanatory. The Draining Welk is very similar. It's actually a flash creature, but it can be searched up with mystical teachings. And if they let the Draining Welk resolve and come into play, then you can deal with whatever they have, and then make it really big. So, obviously, the bigger the spell you counter with it, the better, and it can be a really massive flying creature. So, good stuff on that Draining Welk. Counterspell on a stick. Overwhelming Intellect is very similar to Draining Welk in that the bigger the creature you counter with the intellect, the more cards you can draw. It's a draw engine. That's basically it. You get value and you can draw a fistful of cards. So good, especially if you have something like Reliquary Tower, where you have no maximum hand size, and you're drawing some. Let's say you draw 8 cards, or more reasonable would be 6 off of a Frost Titan or something. Then you can keep them around. It's great card advantage, especially mid to late game. Number 4, we have Fight to the Death. This is sort of an obscure board wipe, and that's how I like to think of this card. Turn your chump blocks into very, very effective kills. Fight to the Death can be a one-sided board wipe in some cases, or at least leave you with an advantage afterwards. It is a little bit situational, based on the creature position at the time it is cast, who's attacking, who's not, things like that, but it only costs 2 mana, and is not very expensive as a card itself. So it's really worth including, especially if you do not want to buy things like Armageddon. Sorry, not Armageddon, that destroys all lands. If you don't want to buy Wrath of God or something, just get a Fight to the Death. And you're playing Boros, you've got a board wipe in many cases. Number 3, we have Artifact and Enchantment Killers as a general group. EDH is very, very full of artifacts and enchantments, and a lot of them are just for utility, and some are vital to winning the game for some decks. Revoke Existence, Wear and Tear, Nature's Claim, Krosan Grip, Return to Dust, Disenchant. All of these are awesome. They take out artifacts and enchantments. I like to play at least one, usually maybe 2, of these styles of cards in most of my EDH decks, just because it's an advantage card. It really does give great advantage in decks that rely heavily on artifacts and enchantments. Totally a cool card. Wait a minute, never mind, that's 3 cards. Man, sorry, I'm a little bit tired. Anyways, number 2 is another newer card from Gatecrash, Assemble the Legion. So, call the Skybreaker, and knock down its mana cost, change its colors, make it a permanent, and make the things it produces 1/1s, make it so you don't have to discard land, and you get a ton of them and they're hasty, and that's Assemble the Legion. In a really overcomplicated description. If they don't deal with Assemble the Legion quickly, you're going to completely overrun them. More and more soldiers hit the field. More and more soldiers hit the field. What's this? 6th turn I've had Assemble the Legion? Oh, I'm just going to add 6 more soldiers in addition to the however many I have had before, maybe 12. So now I have 18 soldiers, and I'll attack with all of them. Yeah. Put this with Collective Blessing, and you win the game in many cases, because most decks are lacking these cards here. Artifact and Enchantment Killers. If you play these, you can stop this guy. He's so good. If you're playing Boros, I totally recommend this. It's a great win condition. It's hard to deal with, and even if they board wipe, you just get more soldiers, so good stuff. Lastly, in the number 1 spot is a little bit of an obscure, well, not obscure, but more just underplayed and unused card from M13, Staff of Nin. Staff of Nin is so good. It is card advantage, it is creature advantage. It pings little creatures, it's a consistent source of small damage to your opponent to help get in the win faster, and it is insane. Rod of Ruin was just reprinted in M14. They printed an uncommon that sucks. It costs 4 mana to play a Rod of Ruin, and then 3 mana every time you want to deal 1 damage to something. You have to tap it to deal the damage too. That's kind of pointless when you could just play a Staff of Nin, where tapping it is free, and you get to draw an extra card per turn. So much advantage. It's really overlooked, and it has earned its place in the decks in which I've used it. It's really good. Another great thing about it is an artifact. It's applicable in almost every deck because it doesn't require a certain set of mana colors to play it. So that's all for this top 10 list. I want to know what you guys think. Comments, please. Anything like that. Any suggestions you may have. Cards that are underused that you play or that you've seen your friends play that are really good. I'd love to hear about it. Let me know. If you want another top 10 list, sort of like this one, you can put in a request for that. Leave a comment. all good. I will definitely do lists that are requested, and if not, I will just do one that I have created myself, something like that. So I thank you guys for watching, and I hope that you continue to enjoy these lists as I come out with them. Thanks again.